Kupiansk is becoming a place where war stops looking like war and starts looking like a quiet street that can kill on command. On the map, it is just another contested city. On the ground, it is a moving test of whether an army can still attack when every step, every engine sound, and every short pause can be spotted, tracked, and punished. For weeks, control around Kupiansk has shifted in harsh, local swings, yet one trend keeps tightening like a noose. Russian assault groups try to press in from multiple directions, and they keep getting broken before they can turn pressure into a real breach. The surprise is not only the losses, it is the timing. Many attacks do not fail at the final line. They fail on the approach, in the low sky zone where small drones and FPV teams turn open ground into a monitored corridor and turn almost there into a dead end. And once movement becomes the enemy, numbers stop acting like power because soldiers can be sent forward, but they cannot be moved forward in one piece. Stay with military force because what is happening in Kupiansk may be the blueprint for how the next phase of this war is fought. Kupiansk has become a high-risk sector for Russian forces because units are being pulled into a cycle of holding ground and trying to retake it while they are watched almost all the time. Control does not flip in one big sweep there because it shifts in tight patches of streets, tree lines, and short road segments. And that kind of fight punishes any side that needs to reposition often. Every time a group rotates, spreads out, or tries to regroup, it leaves traces that can be picked up, and the cost of staying in the game rises even when the map barely changes. That is why this sector feels less like a single battle, and more like a constant pressure test that never fully ends. So the city is not only a location, it is a place where the tempo itself becomes a weapon. Reports describing this phase show a force that cannot simply pause and rebuild, because the moment it slows down, it risks losing what it still holds. That is why reinforcements keep getting pushed in, even when conditions are bad, because the alternative looks like a collapse of presence rather than a clean withdrawal. This creates a harsh math problem, because more troops can mean more staying power, yet it also means more targets that must be fed, moved, and protected under observation. The pressure is not only at the front edge, because it spreads into supply habits, rest cycles, and the basic ability to keep units steady after repeated shocks. And when soldiers sense they are being tracked, even short tasks start to feel like gambling. That is where the danger deepens, because physical losses and mental strain begin to stack at the same time. From the outside, it can look like a normal contest for a city. But the inside story is that survival depends on small decisions made every hour. A vehicle that takes the wrong turn, a group that pauses too long, or a team that bunches up near cover can trigger a chain of consequences that is hard to stop once it starts. This is also why ground can change hands without a clear victory moment, because both sides can fight for the same blocks, lose them, and then contest them again under the same surveillance pressure. So progress becomes slow, but the damage keeps accumulating in the background. That kind of grind forces commanders to choose between two bad options, because they either keep pushing people forward to avoid losing initiative, or they pull back and risk giving the other side room to stabilize. In Kupiansk, that choice is even sharper, because the space around the city offers only limited routes, and limited routes are easier to monitor and disrupt. Over time, this shifts the meaning of control, because holding a point is not enough if the routes between points are unsafe. A force can sit in a position, yet still be trapped if it cannot move supplies, evacuate wounded, or shift teams without being spotted. That is why a sector can feel stable on paper while being fragile in reality. It also explains why some accounts describe Russian units being thinned down inside the urban area, even while new groups are sent toward the wider perimeter. Those numbers are often hard to verify in real time, so the safer takeaway is the pattern. Repeated attempts to keep a foothold are meeting a level of exposure that makes even routine movement costly. When a battlefield reaches that stage, The main threat is not only a direct firefight, but the loss of flexibility. Flexibility is what lets an army correct mistakes, and without it, small setbacks can turn into long setbacks. This is how a city becomes a trap without needing a dramatic encirclement, because the trap is built through constant pressure on every connecting line. In that kind of environment, the question stops being who has more troops and becomes who can still act like a coordinated force under stress. And that is the lens through which Kupiansk should be watched, because the most important shifts may happen off-camera, inside logistics, morale, and the ability to keep units moving. With that reality in place, the focus naturally turns to how attacks are being shaped and stopped before they even reach decisive ground. Russia is trying to squeeze Kupiansk from several directions, but these pushes keep getting stopped before they can turn pressure into a real breach. The pattern is not one clean spearhead, because it looks more like a set of probing thrusts that aim to tighten the perimeter and force Ukraine to stretch its defense. In the reporting tied to this sector, the northern pressure points include the area around Holubivka, while the eastern axis points toward Petropavlivka, Podoli, and Kucherivka, and the southeast pressure includes places like Pishchani, Stepova Novoselivka, and Kurilivka. That spread matters, because it signals an intent to create multiple problems at once, rather than gamble everything on a single road. Yet the same spread also creates a big weakness, because coordination becomes harder when each small assault must move, hide, communicate, and resupply under observation. In practice, many of these attacks appear to get detected early, so the assault groups start losing men and momentum before they even reach the areas where close combat could give them an advantage. This changes what contact looks like, because the fight often starts on the approach route, not at the final trench or the first building line. When a unit is cut down in that early phase, it does not only lose soldiers, it loses timing. And timing is what links one direction of attack to the other. Some small groups can still slip forward, but then a second problem hits, because holding a foothold is not the same as sustaining it. If vehicles cannot move close, then ammunition, food, water, batteries, and medical evacuation become slow and risky, and a position that looks acceptable for 1 hour can become a liability by nightfall. This is why a map can show pressure on 3 sides, yet the ground reality stays messy, because pressure without safe logistics is just noise. There is also a tactical trap inside multi-axis attacks, because each thrust needs the others to distract. But once one thrust is disrupted, the others lose cover. That loss of cover shows up fast, since reconnaissance can shift attention toward the remaining movement corridors, and those corridors become more predictable over time. So even if a commander sends several small groups, the enemy does not need to defeat all of them in one moment. It only needs to break the rhythm, because broken rhythm means no synchronized surge, and no synchronized surge means no clean encirclement. This is how encirclement can exist as an intention, but fail to appear as a physical seal, since a seal requires control of the routes, not just pressure near them. The more Russia relies on many small pushes, the more it risks turning its own plan into a series of isolated fights that do not add up. That is the core problem with a scattered assault method under constant surveillance, because one locked link can unravel the whole chain. And once the chain unravels, the battle stops being about taking ground quickly and becomes about surviving the approach without losing the ability to try again. That is why the key question shifts from where Russia attacks to what is stopping those attacks before they even get close. The main reason Russia keeps stalling near Kupiansk is Ukraine's kill zone system, because it works like a day and night hunting network instead of a single defensive line. This is not just a few drones flying around, because the reports describe something closer to a drone wall that creates a buffer zone where forces struggle to gather without being seen. In that picture, the sky becomes a sensor grid, and the ground becomes a space where any pattern can be read as a target. Some sources even describe the depth of this zone as stretching for many kilometers from the contact line, which matters because it pushes danger far beyond the trenches. So a unit can still be outside the fight on paper, yet already be inside a monitored corridor in real life. The key point is not only how many drones are in the air, because the real advantage comes from how they are organized in layers. Reconnaissance drones search for heat, movement, fresh tracks, and changes in terrain. Then they feed that information into an attack cycle that can start within minutes. FPV teams do not have to roam blindly because they can hold back, stay ready, and launch when a target is confirmed. Other platforms help keep eyes on the area, so a group does not simply disappear after the first sighting, and that continuity is what makes the system feel sticky. When tracking stays unbroken, the enemy loses the ability to reset the fight by slipping away for a short time. This changes how assaults fail, because many attacks do not get stopped by one big burst of firepower. They get worn down by repeated contact, repeated pressure, and repeated small strikes that hit at the worst moments. A column that pauses to check a route becomes visible longer, and a squad that bunches up near cover becomes easier to mark. Even a short stop to catch breath can turn into an exposure window, since the sky is watching for habits, not heroics. That is why this kill zone acts like a machine, because it turns ordinary movement into a sequence of decisions that can be punished. When Russia tries to open a corridor for an assault, the challenge is not just crossing one dangerous stretch. It is surviving a chain of engagements, where the first contact reveals the route, the second contact forces a change, and the third contact hits the group when it is already disorganized. In that sequence, one mistake is not required because pressure itself creates mistakes over time. This is also why the system blocks momentum, because momentum depends on smooth movement, and smooth movement is exactly what the drones are designed to deny. Once a unit is forced to slow down, spacing becomes harder to keep, communication becomes riskier, and the whole group starts acting like separate pieces instead of one plan. That fragmentation is a victory on its own, because broken pieces are easier to track and easier to finish. It also explains why Ukraine can keep more soldiers behind cover while still shaping the fight, since drones can do the dangerous work of contact and correction. This is a modern form of defense, because it trades massed troops for a massed sensor and strike loop that can be scaled and repeated. And that leads to the uncomfortable truth for any attacking force. If the approach route is controlled, the battlefield is already lost before the trench is reached. With that system in mind, the next question becomes simple, because it is about what this drone wall does to vehicles, foot movement, and the basic chance of survival. This network makes safe movement near Kupiansk almost impossible for Russian forces, because infantry often has to walk exposed routes while vehicles get spotted and hit before they reach useful ground. In older battles, armor could push closer to drop troops and supplies, then pull back behind cover. But a drone-heavy sky changes that math fast. When engines start, dust rises, tracks appear, and any column becomes a clear signal that can be followed from far away. That is why reports describe a form of mobility lock, where Russia is forced to limit driving and accept slower, riskier ways to advance. And once vehicles cannot move forward, the burden shifts to the soldiers' legs, which means longer infiltration distances under constant observation. Walking is quieter than a truck, but it takes more time, and time is exactly what reconnaissance drones exploit. A group can crawl, cut through tree lines, and move in short bursts, yet the longer it stays in the zone, the more chances the sky has to catch a pattern. This is where the trap tightens, because exposure is not just about open fields, it is about repeated moments that add up to a detectable story. Under these conditions, small Russian infiltration teams often get watched until they run out of cover, daylight, or energy. And that is what running out of time really means. A team may reach a ditch, a shed, or a ruined house and believe it has found a pause point, but drones can hold contact and keep that pause from becoming safety. Once a target is confirmed, the strike phase can start quickly, and sources describe situations where several FPV drones can be assigned to one target to raise the kill chance. That tactic matters because one drone can miss, lose signal, or get shot, but a cluster changes the odds and forces the target into panic choices. At that moment, movement becomes a gamble, since staying still invites a direct hit, while running often exposes the body in open ground. This is why the system does not need to win by big explosions, because it wins by forcing bad options when stress is already high. A story used in the reporting captures the human side of this pressure without needing dramatic language. It describes a captured Russian soldier who was tasked with guiding small groups through the monitored zone, and across multiple attempts, the groups he led were wiped out while he survived by chance and timing. In the end, he surrendered, and the point of the story is not heroism or shame, but the message it sends about how hard it is to cross a space where someone else controls the sky. Guides exist for a reason, because terrain is confusing, mines are real, and units need routes. Yet even a good route can fail if drones keep the route under watch. This kind of experience also explains why assault teams can look active, yet still fail to build a lasting foothold, because survivors arrive scattered, tired, and short on supplies. It is also why commanders may keep sending small groups because big columns are too visible, but small groups still face the same surveillance loop, just with fewer people. So the problem is not only firepower, it is the feeling of having no safe pause, since every pause can be followed and every follow can turn into an attack. That is what no way out means in a modern kill zone, because the exit routes are often as dangerous as the entry routes. And once movement is locked this tightly, the next question becomes how Ukraine uses that advantage to reduce its own frontline exposure and turn the area into a controlled attrition space. This approach lets Ukraine keep more infantry out of the most dangerous contact points, because technology is used to break Russia's ability to hold ground and organize attacks, turning the space around Kupiansk into an attrition trap. Instead of meeting every push with more bodies in trenches, Ukraine can use drones to slow movement, force dispersal, and punish regrouping, which means fewer close-range fights where defenders take the highest risk. That matters in a long war, because a force that can defend while exposing fewer soldiers can stay stable longer, even when the front line stays active every day. It also changes the emotional weight of the fight, because a unit that feels covered by a constant surveillance and strike loop can choose better moments to move, rather than reacting in panic. This is where Kupiansk stops being a local story, because the same logic can be applied anywhere the attacker depends on foot assaults and road-based supply. Sources already point to other hot sectors where drone pressure and coordinated artillery or airstrikes are being used to widen these dangerous corridors, which suggests the method is not locked to one city. Once a kill zone proves it can deny mobility, commanders will try to replicate it where the terrain funnels movement into predictable routes. That replication can be selective, because it does not need to cover every kilometer equally if the goal is to crush the heaviest attack lanes. Still, scaling this into a lasting strategy comes down to production and sustainment, not slogans. A kill zone only exists if there are enough drones, enough trained operators, enough spare parts, and enough batteries and antennas to keep the system running daily. One report line that stands out is the claim that Ukraine aimed to receive around 3 million drones by the end of 2025, which signals that quantity is being treated as a strategic resource, not a side project. Even with big numbers, the real test is the burn rate, because drones are consumables, and the side that can replace losses faster can keep the pressure constant. That is why there is also a push to reduce reliance on imported models, since a supply chain that can be interrupted is a weak point in a drone-first plan. When drone output becomes domestic and routine, the kill zone becomes less of a special operation and more of a standing capability. From the viewpoint of asymmetric warfare, the objective is not always fast territory gain, because it is often to make the enemy's attack habit unaffordable. If each attempt to press forward ends with vehicles lost, squads thinned, and time wasted, then the attacker starts paying more for less effect. Over months, that cost can turn into hesitation, because commanders must justify why another push is worth the losses when the odds look worse each time. This is how attrition works in a drone age, because it drains manpower, equipment, and will together, not in separate lanes. And once that drain becomes predictable, the fight shifts again, because the key question becomes how Russia adapts to survive inside a battlefield that is designed to keep it bleeding. Kupiansk shows that modern war is shifting from taking a line to breaking the ability to move, and drones are the tool that makes that shift real on the ground. When Russia is forced to attack inside a zone that is watched almost non-stop, manpower stops acting like a simple advantage, because attrition also hits timing, supply habits, and the confidence needed to keep pushing. In the near term, the key signs to watch are the depth of the vehicle denial area, the number of FPV strikes used to finish one target, and how well Russian units can use jamming, decoys, or smoke to disrupt the find-and-hit cycle. Over the medium term, the bigger question is whether Ukraine can sustain drone output, trained operators, and the spare parts flow at the scale required, because a kill zone only works when it stays active every day. If this model spreads across other hot sectors, the war may be shaped less by dramatic arrows on maps and more by who can control the low sky longer, since that control sets the pace of losses. Subscribe to Military Force for clear, grounded battlefield analysis you can trust.